Why empaths are sexually dangerous. Most people can't handle the depth. True intimacy, a connection many claim to desire, is paradoxically feared by most. It demands an honesty that goes beyond mere attraction or chemistry, requiring one to shed the carefully constructed masks built over years. For an empath, the very idea of a casual connection is an oxymoron. When they open themselves to another, they don't just perceive, they deeply experience, absorbing the emotional landscape, the underlying tensions, and the entire nervous system that someone has spent decades concealing. This profound level of engagement can feel overwhelmingly intense, almost spiritual, a sensation akin to standing in fire, yet simultaneously becoming more alive. The concept of a porous boundary is more than just a metaphor for heightened sensitivity. It describes a fundamental architectural reality of the empathic psyche. Most individuals operate with a psychological skin, a necessary set of filters and defenses that protect them from being overwhelmed by the psychic noise of their environment. This psychological barrier allows them to maintain a distinct self, buffered from the internal states of others, even in a crowded room. However, for an empath, this skin is exceedingly thin, sometimes transparent, or effectively absent. They possess a neurological and spiritual permeability that means their self is constantly infiltrated by the other. Understanding this inherent permeability reveals why sexual desire for an empath transcends a mere physiological urge. It becomes a profound and often perilous metaphysical event. In the context of intimacy, the absence of these standard psychological filters means an empath isn't merely engaging with a partner's physical body. Instead, they are flooded by that partner's entire internal world. Every unspoken resentment, every flicker of anxiety, every shadow of past trauma, and every genuine expression of affection is directly transmitted into the empath's nervous system. It's a total sensory and emotional inundation, demanding an intense level of processing. This total immersion means that the common act of becoming one flesh is not just poetic language for an empath, it's a literal, overwhelming experience of psychic fusion. Many people find this difficult to manage because they often present a curated version of themselves, hiding deeper fears and impulses behind a veneer of casual interaction. Yet wearing a mask is impossible with a porous being. An empath inherently perceives the reality beneath, and in moments of shared desire, that truth becomes a part of their own experience. This creates a depth of burden that is almost impossible to overstate. If a connection is shallow, or if a partner approaches intimacy as a form of ego validation or simply biological release, the empath experiences this not just as unsatisfying, but as a profound violation of their soul's integrity. To be porous is to be acutely vulnerable to the unintegrated aspects of another person's psyche. If the union lacks underlying meaning or truth, an empath feels as though they are being filled with unproductive static, a desecration of their internal sanctuary. Conversely, when a connection is rooted in truth and genuine intention, the intensity escalates to something bordering on the sacred. An empath isn't merely seeking pleasure. They are pursuing a dissolution of the ego, an opportunity for a genuine encounter with a higher, almost divine presence through the other. This explains the profound depth of their desire. The stakes are the highest possible. It is the pursuit of a union so absolute that it challenges the very existence of the individual self. Most people instinctively recoil from this level of intensity, preferring a lighter intimacy, the warmth of the fire without the risk of being consumed. They guard their hearts and boundaries, fearing what might happen if they truly let someone in, or worse, if they truly saw what was inside themselves. The empath, however, does not possess this luxury. Their very nature compels them to stand in the heart of the flame. To experience desire as an empath means accepting the profound risk of total psychic disintegration for the sake of a moment of pure, unfiltered being. This level of openness to the world is a heavy, demanding responsibility, requiring a courage and psychological fortitude that most individuals have not developed. Many prefer the perceived safety of their thick psychological barriers, unaware that while these defenses protect them from the overwhelming emotional currents, they also prevent them from ever truly connecting with the profound depths of life. This profound sensitivity in an empath is not merely a personality quirk or an exaggerated emotional response. It is a concrete physiological reality rooted in the hyperreactivity of their mirror neuron system. To grasp this, one must understand how the mirror neuron system functions and how its calibration dictates the difference between a buffered, functional existence and a life lived in constant simulated intensity. In an average person, mirror neurons facilitate social cohesion, allowing us to intuit another's intentions and feelings. When we observe someone reaching for a glass or wincing in pain, our brain maps that action or sensation onto our internal framework, creating a biological bridge of understanding. However, for most people, there is a clear neurological gate separating observation from direct experience. You acknowledge another's pain, but you don't literally feel their nerve endings firing in your own limb. For the empath, this gate is not just ajar, it's as if it has been torn off its hinges. Their nervous system doesn't merely observe the state of another, it simulates that state with such high fidelity that the distinction between my pleasure and your pleasure becomes biologically blurred. This reconfigures intimacy from a two-party interaction into a singular fused neurological event. When an empath achieves a state of deep connection, their brain isn't just processing its own neurochemical responses like dopamine and oxytocin. It actively captures the chemical and electrical overflow from their partner. In a very real sense, they inhabit two bodies simultaneously. This is the biological mechanism underpinning the depth that many find so intimidating. To be intimate with an empath means not just being observed or admired, but having your entire physiological reality mirrored back into a consciousness that can feel your pulse, your breath, and your internal tensions as if they were its own. This creates a feedback loop of staggering proportions. As a partner's arousal intensifies, the empath deeply senses and reflects that state, initiating a recursive spiral of sensation that rapidly surpasses typical or comfortable levels of human experience. It's akin to a biological resonance chamber, where the signal doesn't simply dissipate, but builds until it threatens to completely overwhelm the system. Many people are unequipped to handle this level of transparency. We are accustomed to our bodies being private, our internal sensations exclusively ours. Being with an empath requires surrendering that privacy, leading to an involuntary and total exposure. If there is an emotional block, a coldness, fear, or shame within a partner, the empath's nervous system will detect and reflect that frequency. This is not an intrusive act. It's an involuntary biological response, as their mirror neurons fire in a desperate attempt to achieve homeostasis with the surrounding environment. This is why many describe interactions with empaths as too intense or exhausting. The empath holds up a biological mirror that offers a far higher resolution than most people's self-image can comfortably endure. This neurobiological sensitivity also clarifies the empath's fundamental need for truth and desire. Because their nervous system is diligently simulating the partner's state, any internal contradiction within the partner, for example, a physical act of lust accompanied by an emotional state of contempt or detachment, generates a neurological dissonance that is physically painful for the empath. It's like hearing two musical notes played slightly out of tune, setting one's teeth on edge. Consequently, an empath cannot comfortably engage in casual, fragmented, or dishonest connections. Their biology mandates a total alignment of intent and action because they are the ones who must internally live with the simulation of that intent. Most of the world exists in a state of low-level psychological dissociation, but the empath is biologically incapable of this. They are compelled into a state of hyperpresence, a complete commitment. This level of physiological engagement is an intense fire that most people instinctively avoid. They prefer the shallow end of the pool where the water is cool and the stakes are low, never realizing that the empath is navigating profound currents of sensation in the deep end, currents that are as terrifying as they are transcendent. The burden of depth is a significant psychological and existential weight, transforming the act of desire from a mere biological function into a rigorous pursuit of logos, the underlying objective truth of a union. To understand why most people struggle with this, one must acknowledge that many live their lives in a state of habitual fragmentation. They maintain separate professional, social, and private, often shadowy sexual and loving selves. They navigate the world by keeping these compartments strictly separated, allowing for shallow interactions without risking the entirety of their being. For an empath, however, this fragmentation is a form of psychic death. Experiencing the world through a lens of profound interconnectedness means they cannot engage in a physical act divorced from spiritual or intellectual meaning. For them, desire is a quest for the Word made flesh, a realization of a deeper order that justifies the intensity of the connection. If that meaning is absent, if the union is merely a casual collision of bodies seeking temporary pleasure, the empath experiences an ontological betrayal. It isn't just unsatisfying in a superficial sense, it feels like a violation of the fundamental structure of reality itself. This approach to intimacy is inherently intimidating to the average person. Most prefer to remain in the realm of pleasantness and ease, skimming the surface of another person's life. But an empath is a deep-sea diver. Their desire seeks the bedrock. They are searching for a partner willing to stand in their truth, who has integrated their own shadow aspects, and who is capable of a level of presence that most individuals find exhausting. The empath's desire is inextricably linked to the integrity of the soul. If they sense a partner is concealing parts of themselves or using intimacy as a diversion from an inner void, the empath experiences a profound revulsion, a feeling of light meeting darkness and finding no substance. In a world that often champions a no-strings-attached philosophy, the empath's demand for depth is frequently misconstrued as a burden, neediness, or an excessive seriousness that disrupts the low-resolution fun others seem to enjoy. But it is not neediness. It is a high-resolution requirement for coherence. To an empath, a shallow connection is a lie, and being near an empath can be a terrifying prospect for someone living a lie, as they will inevitably reflect that lack of depth. They seek a union that is logos-centric, oriented towards the highest possible good and the deepest possible understanding of the other. This demands a level of psychological commitment that many are either too lazy or too frightened to undertake. It requires showing up with your complete self, your history, your fears, your potential, and your spirit. When an empath feels desire so deeply, it's because they perceive the potential for a truly transformative union, a state where two individuals help each other evolve beyond their individual limitations. This isn't merely about feeling good, it's about the profound development of the self through the catalytic fire of the other. Many retreat from this because it necessitates sacrifice, relinquishing petty, ego-driven defenses for a terrifyingly real encounter with another human soul. The weight of this depth is a constant companion for the empath. They perceive the world not as a random assortment of objects, but as an intricate web of significant meanings. When they enter the sanctuary of intimacy, they expect that significance to be honored. If it is treated with flippancy or used for manipulation, the empath's internal world can collapse into chaos. They are the early warning system in human relationships, feeling the toxicity of a shallow culture long before others do. This makes their desire a double-edged sword, a gateway to the most transcendent experiences imaginable, the one flesh unity described in ancient texts, but also a source of profound isolation. They search for gold amidst the dross, meaning in the noise, and logos in the lust. Most people are content with the dross because the gold is too heavy to carry. Yet, for an empath, there is no other way to live. They would rather endure the desert of isolation than feast on the empty calories of a meaningless connection. The shadow of the union represents the ultimate boundary of human experience, a threshold where the empath's capacity for depth confronts the terrifying reality of ego dissolution. For most individuals, the ego serves as a defensive fortification, a rigid structure painstakingly built over a lifetime to shield them from the world's overwhelming complexity and potential harms. This ego asserts, I am me and you are you, providing safety through separation. However, when an empath enters a state of deep sexual desire and intimacy, they implicitly invite the demolition of these fortifications, calling for a state where the walls between two psyches are not merely breached, but completely dismantled. This is the shadow because it involves a confrontation with a profound void, the fear that if one truly merges with another, there will be nothing left of the individual self to return to. It is a psychological ego death, and it is precisely why most people, despite professing a desire for true love, will retreat into superficiality the moment the emotional intensity of a connection begins to rise. Many are too terrified to undergo this process because they lack the integrated self necessary to survive such a merger. If one's identity is a fragile mask, then the act of total empathic union will inevitably shatter it. Empaths, by virtue of their porous nature, are already accustomed to the shifting tides of identity. But for their partner, this experience can feel like a total loss of control, a descent into the underworld of the collective unconscious, where two individuals are compelled to confront the raw, unvarnished reality of the human condition. In this space, there is no room for the polite fictions of social life. There is only the heat of the fire and the profound weight of the other. Empaths desire this because they instinctively understand that the only path to rebirth into a higher state of consciousness is to first allow the lower, more restricted version of the self to perish. They seek a sacred marriage of opposites, a union that transcends the biological and enters the realm of the truly transformative. However, the cost of entry is everything one believes oneself to be. This is the underlying reason behind the intensity that many find so off-putting in empaths. It's not that the empath feels too much. It's that the empath is too much. A constant reminder of the profound sacrifice required for genuine transcendence. Most people desire the benefits of such a union, the comfort, the pleasure, the validation, without having to pay the metaphysical price. They wish to remain safely within their own skin, yet the empath intuitively knows that such safety is an illusion, and that the only thing worse than the terror of true union is the stagnation of an isolated ego. The shadow aspect also encompasses the risk of absorption. Because an empath is so open, they constantly risk being swallowed whole by a partner's psychic landscape, potentially losing their own sense of orientation in the process. This is the high-stakes game of the empathic life, the pursuit of a connection so deep that it risks total self-obliteration. When an empath encounters someone unwilling or unable to meet them at this level of depth, the result is a profound mourning for what could have been. They perceive the doorway to the infinite, but they see their partner hesitant at the threshold, paralyzed by the fear of losing their minor grievances and comfortable delusions. Most people cannot truly handle an empath's desire because that desire is an implicit demand for them to mature, to transcend the narcissistic play of the ego, and embrace the responsibility of a total union. It calls for a level of courage that is scarce in a culture that often rewards the superficial and the transient. The shadow of the union is the ultimate test of character, posing the question, are you brave enough to truly be seen, and are you strong enough to truly see? The empath answers with a resounding yes, but often finds themselves standing alone in that profound darkness, awaiting a partner who is not afraid of the transformative fire. Therefore, if you find yourself overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what you feel, do not succumb to the misconception that it is too much. You are a vessel for a level of truth that most are simply too terrified to approach. The depth of your desire is not a flaw, it is a profound call to a higher state of being. Stand firmly in your truth. Carry your unique perspective with dignity, and never apologize for a heart that utterly refuses to settle for anything less than profound depth.